The Chicago White Sox have been quiet so far this offseason, but that was to be expected. It feels like the calm before the storm, which will be the winter meetings in early December. Hopefully, the White Sox are aggressive. Not only are we waiting for roster moves, but we are also waiting to find out about Pedro Grifol's coaching staff. Also, I will prepare you for those eventual awkward family or friend White Sox oriented conversations this holiday season.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to talk off-season White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. What went wrong for the White Sox in 2022? It's not just Sox fans asking those questions. Baseball fans everywhere want to know. Start preparing yourself for those White Sox-oriented conversations this holiday season. And as we get closer to the winter meetings, Sox fans are still wondering about the coaches that will surround Pedro Grifol. Just a reminder, there will not be any new episodes on Thanksgiving or on Black Friday. Hopefully you have a safe and enjoyable week. Really thankful for your continued support, especially during this holiday season. The White Sox have been very quiet this November, but that's really no surprise. I would say for the most part, the early part of the off season, everything before the winter meetings is quiet for all of baseball. A few deals get done, a lot of rumors, but right now it just feels like the calm before the storm. And that storm is, of course, the winter meetings, which will be the first week of December. The White Sox have been extremely active in December over the years. Hopefully, they will be aggressive again this year. Lots of holes to fill. As we wait for the roster to flesh out, we are also still wondering about the coaching staff. We know that the coaching staff for the White Sox will look different, but we have not heard a complete official list of who will be in what role. We know about Charlie Montoyo. He's going to be the bench coach for Pedro Grifol. And this is what Grifol has said about Montoyo. This guy's done it, right? He's done it for the last 4 years. He's had success, and I'm really happy to have him on board. Charlie Montoyo has recent managerial experience leading the Toronto Blue Jays from 2019 to 2022 before being fired this past season during an unimpressive start with the Blue Jays. He led Toronto to a 91 win season in 2021 and has an extensive coaching background. This is what general manager Rick Hahn had to say about Montoyo. Charlie has a sterling reputation in this game and is viewed as one of the finer bench coaches of the last decade plus or so. The world knew he was available. It tends to be an insular community, so we knew that there was competition. There were multiple other teams pursuing Charlie. Montoyo, who joined the Rays organization in 1996, managed at every level in the minor leagues before working his way up to Tampa Bay's big league staff. He served as their third base coach from 2015 to 2017 and bench coach in 2018. Hahn called the Montoyo hiring a collaborative effort with Grifol. who was enthusiastic about the possibility as he interviewed for the Sox manager job. Grifol said he and Montoyo have spoken to one another on a few occasions and have no previous ties. I just have so much respect for him and what he's done in the game, Grifol said. Here's a guy that was in the minor leagues for a long time as a minor league manager, got an opportunity to get to the big leagues. He was a bench coach for Tampa. He's extremely smart, bilingual, got a chance to manage in the American League East. I'm really excited to bring him on board. I think he's going to help us. He's going to help me tremendously. We know Ethan Katz and Curt Hasler will be staying on. We know that there's going to be a new bench coach. Joe McEwing will not return. Haven't heard really any names emerge. Is it going to be somebody from the Kansas City organization? Will be somebody from within the White Sox world somewhere, but have not heard about the third base coach and haven't heard anything official about Daryl Boston. There wasn't a mention that Daryl Boston will be gone like there was with Joe McEwing, but I haven't heard anything about first base. And we're still waiting officially for hitting coach. In early November, there were some reports out there that the hitting coach for the Kansas City Royals, Matt Tosar, would be joining Pedro Grifol's coaching staff as the new hitting coach for the White Sox. Now, Tosar may still be joining the coaching staff, but a few days ago, Chicago Sun-Times reporter Daryl Van Scoven tweeted out that AAA hitting coach Chris Johnson will be promoted to the big leagues, but we do not know what his role will be. One can only speculate that since there has not been an announcement of Matt Tosar as the new hitting coach, maybe Chris Johnson will be the man for the job. Here's what Mark Polish from MLB Trade Rumors had to say. The White Sox are expected to promote Chris Johnson to the big league coaching staff. Daryl Van Scoven of the Chicago Sun-Times reported via Twitter, Johnson has been the hitting coach of AAA Charlotte for the last 2 seasons. Johnson's new role on the South Side isn't yet known, though it would stand to reason that he'll be moving into at least an assistant hitting coach position on the overhauled Sox staff. Hitting coach Frank Menachino isn't being retained for the 2023 season, and it doesn't appear as though assistant hitting coach Howie Clark is coming back either, as Clark wasn't one of the few names mentioned by GM Rick Hahn as part of next season's staff. Pitching coach Ethan Katz and bullpen coach Curt Hasler look to be the only coaches returning under new manager Pedro Grifol, and the White Sox have already made a new bench coach hire in Charlie Montoyo. It'll be the first MLB coaching job for Johnson, who only coached the coaching ranks with his hire in Charlotte 2 seasons ago. Fans will remember Johnson for his 8-year playing career, 2009 through 2016. He appeared in 839 games and slashed .275, .313, .404 with 63 home runs in just under 3,000 plate appearances. Most of Johnson's career was spent with the Astros and Braves, though he also had brief stints in Arizona, Cleveland, and Miami. So when people ask me about the Pedro Grifol hire, I tell them a lot depends on the people that he will surround himself with. Being a first-time manager, I think he will need the right chemistry and have a healthy rapport with the people he collaborates with. Hopefully those names start appearing soon, definitely by the winter meetings. If you are like me, you will be talking sports this holiday season with family and friends, and the White Sox will definitely be a topic of conversation. I'm going to tell you why there's nothing wrong with airing your grievances. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Simply Safe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On White Sox listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package theft spike nationally? That's why our friends at Simply Safe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your Simply Safe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get priority police response. Simply Safe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 a day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. With the top-rated Simply Safe app, stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere, arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. Don't miss your chance to save big this holiday season. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedonMLB today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/lockedonMLB. There's no safe like Simply Safe. So how about those holiday conversations? You know you're going to have them, and they will be with a variety of different people. They will be with some relatives that you might not have seen for a very long time, getting together, and it's awkward. What do you talk about? And if you're like me, you might go right to sports, specifically the Chicago White Sox, even if they are not a baseball fan or a White Sox fan. You might try just to push the content on them. You will be seeing friends and family, and you might want to talk sports. Will the conversation ultimately land on the White Sox for you? Maybe they aren't, even Sox fans, but they might want to talk baseball, and they might want to discuss what in the world happened in 2022 and what are the Sox going to do this offseason to bounce back in 2023. Most likely, the conversation will center on Pedro Grifol, but I think the biggest question marks are the holes the Sox need to fill. What will the White Sox do to solidify the starting rotation? Maybe the decision to non-tender Engel and Mendick. Maybe folks want to talk to you about that. Be prepared. I got to believe second base will be a top priority of conversation. Should the Sox fill that role internally, or do you think they can actually trade or spend money in the thin free agent market? We talked about Gene Segura in the most recent episode. Should the Sox go after Cody Bellinger after the Los Angeles Dodgers non-tendered him last week? And then there are going to be arguments over Jose Abreu leaving. There will definitely be that Cubs fan in your life that will want to brag about the amount of money their team is ready to spend on a top of the line shortstop, or they will tease you about, Jose Abreu being in a Cubs uniform on opening day. I recently had an opportunity to talk with the host of Locked On MLB, Paul Francis Sullivan, and he wanted to recap the White Sox season, what went wrong, the long list of that, and of course the Pedro Grifol hire, and even how the Sox can rebound in 2023. Always interesting talking to folks that are fans of other teams and, hearing their perspective on what happened to the White Sox. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of shock. There's still, when you talk to folks that are just baseball fans in general, okay, maybe, run into folks in the airport while you're traveling, wherever. This has probably happened to you. You'll still get people asking you about Tony La Russa. Why did the White Sox hire Tony La Russa? And it is a long conversation, right? I had some of those moments with Paul Francis Sullivan. The White Sox were a confusing and disappointing team in 2022, but I'm going to tell you why baseball fans everywhere could not figure out the Southsiders. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which I'm sure you do, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. So I had some recent discussions with the host of Locked On MLB, Paul Francis Sullivan, and one of the biggest questions, I think one of the first things that we started to get into was, why didn't the White Sox fire Tony La Russa in a similar vein to what the Philadelphia Phillies did with Girardi? And Paul Francis Sullivan said, the Sox, I feel like they could have fixed things quicker. They might have been in the postseason if they just would have fired Tony La Russa early on and let Miguel Cairo finish off the rest of the season. The players obviously responded to Cairo, and I obviously that would have made the most sense, right? But for so many different reasons, obviously that wasn't going to happen. Of course, the Jerry Reinsdorf dynamic and what La Russa means to Reinsdorf and why La Russa was even brought in the first place, which of course was by Jerry. So, talking about that, I'm sure, you'll have conversations with folks again, whether it's Thanksgiving, the holidays, you might have seen for a while, and they'll say, what's going on? How come the Sox brought back La Russa? What happened with him? Those are the types of things that other fans still want to know about in regards to the Sox. Why didn't things work out for the White Sox? Talking a lot about the lack of urgency early on in the season, the workload management, almost the resting guys for the stretch when, we were giving away games in April and May. Of course, there were a ton of injuries, guys playing out of position. And then I think there's this attitude amongst players of, this is going to be a cakewalk. We will be able to dominate the AL Central once again. Obviously, players not living up to their potential, on and on and on. It was just a mess, an absolute mess. Why you have to spend or essentially buy a championship? Sullivan brought up some points of what other teams have done, namely, how the Phillies got to the World Series. Understandably, they did not win the World Series, but how they had so much success. They spent money, and they spent money the right way, and why that is lacking on the South Side, and who's responsible for that. We talked a lot about the Grifol hire and what that means for the organization and the direction that the Sox might be heading. Like what does that say about Pedro Grifol's hire, about what this 2023 season could mean, or what the Sox were lacking as a team? And I really believe, again, it's going to be the people that Grifol surrounds himself with, and people that he trusts, hopefully, that will make him better as a first-time MLB manager. Also, what's the roster going to look like? We don't know. We know the holes that they need to fill. We can guess internally what's going to happen, but a lot will be determined during the winter meetings if the White Sox are going this trade route. So that episode with Paul Francis Sullivan, Locked On MLB, that should drop Friday morning. Check that out. You can find it anywhere you find your podcasts. Folks, I really appreciate you making time for this podcast, making it part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere, and also on YouTube. We are on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the next episode, I'll continue to examine off-season White Sox scenarios as the Sox go full steam ahead with the Pedro Grifol era. Really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski. Until next time, go Sox.